Hello Year 7, so this week we are going to be following on from last week's work that you did with Mr. Stock, and we are going to be writing a comparison between extracts from the beginning of the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight to an extract at the end of the story, which we'll be looking at today. So we'll start off with a recap quiz, then we'll do some mind mapping, which will work as a bit of planning towards your comparison, and we'll be analysing and annotating our new extract before writing a comparative paragraph, which will be your task at the end. So our first task will be a quiz on last week's work. It's a bit of recap. So you'll need to have looked at the two extracts from last week's lesson in order to complete this quiz successfully. One was in a video recorded by Mr. Stock, and one was for you to annotate yourselves. If you haven't already seen them, please go back and do so now, as you will need that, or you'll at least need a basic understanding of those two extracts in order to complete the work today. So, first question, what colour was Sir Gawain's shield? 2. What did the colour of Sir Gawain's shield symbolise? 3. Which simile is used to describe Gawain's goodness? 4. How would you describe Gawain's journey through England's realm? And 5. Where does Gawain think that he will find the Green Knight? The answers to these questions are on the PowerPoint that you have, but they're not in this video. So please mark it yourself once you have completed the quiz. Please try and complete the quiz before you look at the answers. So your first task is to create a mind map based on the last two extracts you looked at last lesson. In the mind map, you will need to include 5 examples of adjectives you would use to describe Sir Gawain, some evidence to support that adjective, and a brief explanation about how the quote demonstrates how Gawain is presented. I've put 2 examples here for you. You need 5 in total. So, example at the top, adjective, he is confident. Evidence, he slung it around his neck. Explanation, slung, is a dynamic verb, shows that he is casual and confident. He's just slung it across his back, all of his weapons, etc. He's ready to go. Another example, adjective persistent, which means that he doesn't give up. Evidence, he rides and rides. Explanation, the repetition of rides shows that he continues his quest despite the hardship and distance of the journey. You'll see that I've highlighted slung and repetition here. Can you please include which method the author has used to demonstrate an aspect of Gawain's character? For example, repetition, adjectives, adverbs, synonyms, symbols, etc. Your word classes, which you will have done this year and at primary school, will count for this as well, adjectives and adverbs. So if you said the adverb slung, for example. If you are stuck looking for adjectives that you might use to describe Gawain, then there are some examples here on the right. The reason we've done this is a nice way of opening your paragraphs is using one of these adjectives to base your point around. So, for example, it might be, the writer has presented Gawain to be a confident character. Then, evidence in a paragraph. This is clear because he slung it around his neck. And then your explanation, the verb slung shows that he is casual and confident. We're now going to move on to our new extract. This one is from towards the end of the story rather than the beginning or the rising action as well, which are the other 2 extracts that you have looked at. So in this, it's worth noting that Gawain, after having gone on his adventure to meet the Green Knight, and in the process of defeating the Green Knight, was seduced by the Green Knight's wife, which is a bit of a breach from Gawain's typical character, as typically he is seen as honourable, virtuous, and only completes tasks or only does anything if he thinks it is just and right and good. However, here he has broken one of these just right actions by allowing himself to be seduced by the wife of the Green Knight. So he's feeling guilty. and he feels like he's broken his vows of honor, although he still has been victorious. So he's feeling some mixed emotions here. So let's read through and see how he's feeling. So he winds through the wilds of the world once more. Gawain on Gringolet, by the grace of God, under a roof sometimes, and sometimes roughing it, and in valleys and vales had adventures and victories, but time is too tight to tell how they went. The nick to his neck was healed by now. Thereabouts he had bound the belt like a baldric, slantwise as a sash from shoulder to side, laced in a knot looped below his left arm, a sign that his honour was stained by sin. So safe and sound he sets foot in court, and when clansmen had learned of their comrade's return, happiness cannoned through the echoing halls. The king kissed his kinsman, and so did the queen, and Gawain was embraced by his band of brothers, who made eager inquiries, and he answered them all with this tale of his trial and tribulations, and the challenge at the chapel, the great green chap, and the love of the lady which led to the belt. And he showed them the scar at the side of his neck, confirming his breach of faith like a badge of blame. He grimaced with disgrace. He writhed in rage and pain. Blood flowed towards his face and showed his smarting shame. Okay, so it ends quite poignantly here with the word shame, that big word there, demonstrating how upset he is by the mistakes that he feels he's made. So let's start at the top. So he winds through the wilds of the world once more. Already we can see some alliteration here. This is really heavily used by the writer. They use a lot of alliteration throughout. That's repetition of letter sounds. So we've got winds, wilds, world, and then on the next line we've got Gawain, Gringlet, Grace, and God. Under a roof sometimes, and sometimes roughing it. So we've got some repetition here. You could annotate that on. It's sometimes and sometimes. Gawain finds the journey home physically challenging. This is quite evident here by he's sometimes roughing it. Roughing it is a phrase used to describe when you are, I don't know, either living on the streets or camping, living a rough life relative to what you normally live. And bearing in mind he is a knight and would have been used to living in a castle, potentially, probably at the court of Camelot. And although he is a knight who goes on these adventures and quests, he is still used to luxury. Then we've got some more alliteration here. And in valleys and vales had adventures and victories, but time is too tight to tell how they went. We really get the impression here that there is an urgency to return home. Although he has had adventures, he's had victories, he's in a rush. He needs to get back. He wants to get back to safety. He wants to get back home. He is exhausted by this venture that he has been on. So the next section, the nick to his neck was healed by now. Thereabouts he had bound the belt like a baldric, slantwise as a sash from shoulder to side, laced in a knot looped below his left arm, a sign that his honour was stained by sin. So here, this belt that he's wearing, he had bound it like a baldric, which is a almost like a scabbard, a sheath where you keep your weapons. So the belt, initially something to protect Gawain from the Green Knight, which was given to him by the Green Knight's wife, is now a symbol of his shame at falling to the temptation. I don't know if you remember Mr. Stock talking about symbolism last lesson, but symbolism is really well used in this entire piece, and the symbol of the belt changes throughout. So it starts out to be a symbol of protection, and towards the end it becomes a symbol of his shame. So his honor was stained by sin. So although he is returning, his honor has been stained by the sin that he committed. So he no longer considers himself as honorable as he was before, no longer perfect, you could say. So he's been damaged in body and mind, or in body and honor, because he's got the wound on his neck, which has started to heal. However, these things would typically still have scarred, so it's not a permanent redemption for him. Then we've got this next section, green section. As I say, more alliteration, more methods. If you see repetition, if you see alliteration, please do highlight it, annotate it. There's loads. So Gawain's return is celebrated by his family, which is his kin. So the king kissed his kinsman. That just means a kinsman is a family member, and his friends, which are the band of brothers. So although these individuals aren't related, they are as close as family. As close as family to him. This really gets the message across that the court of Camelot is a very close-knit group of people who support each other and love each other. So it moves down, mentions the belt again, and the great green chap and the love of the lady which led to the belt. So again, it reiterates that this belt was acquired by the lady, who is the source of Gawain's sin. And he wears it like a badge of blame toward the end. You might want to look at that quotation for later on. Breach of faith like a badge of blame. Remember, Gawain was initially, in the first extract, presented as being a very faithful, holy character who had faith in God, etc. But now he feels like he's broken that, breached it. Looking at the end of the extract uses the same imagery of the colour red from the previous extract. So this red has come back again. We're talking about blood. Blood flowed towards his face. However, whereas before it was a symbol of danger, love and power, it is now a symbol of shame and bruised reputation. Just a type note there. It says reputation. There should be a T between the U and the A. Please put that in when you're getting this down. So your comparison question, which you'll be writing 3-paragraph essay for, is compare how the poet of Sir Gawain in the Green Knight presents the character of Gawain at the beginning and end of the text. So you're comparing how Gawain seems at the beginning and how he seems at the end. You will need to follow these instructions to write your comparative paragraph. Please note that the first 3, 1, 2, and 3, point, evidence, and analysis, or point, evidence, explain, you might have seen, you can use your mind map for. So the work you did at the very beginning of this task, you can use to help you to construct your point, evidence, and first piece of analysis. You will need to do overall an initial point. You could use one of those adjectives from before. Gawain is presented initially as being X. Then a piece of evidence from the first extract. Analyze that piece of evidence. Use a comparative connective, such as on the other hand, alternatively, however, etc. And a comparison point, which we'll mention in a moment. Then you'll use a piece of evidence from today's extract, the end of the text. Analyze that one, and then conclude. So write a short conclusion within your paragraph. All will become clear on the next couple of slides. So first off, here is our example. If you're really finding this whole thing very, very difficult, when it comes to writing your essay, you can use this as one of your paragraphs. However, you will still need 2 of your own. So first off, your point. In the beginning of The Green Knight, the poet presents Sir Gawain as being a character who is noble and pure. So we've got 2 adjectives here which we can use. You can just do this with one. Noble and pure. So we need to now look at how he is seen as noble and pure at the beginning and whether he still is at the end. First piece of evidence, he wears a shield painted in pure gold and was worthy of what he wore. Adding in a quotation mark towards the end of what he wore there. So, if he's equipped with pure gold and is deemed to be worthy of that pure gold, then it suggests that he is a worthwhile individual with purity himself. So, the fact that he is described as being worthy of wearing the pure gold suggests to the reader that he is a pure and noble character because he suits the purity of the symbol on his shield. Now we're coming to this. So far is the same as any other point, evidence, explain paragraph that you've ever written. It's a very similar format. Now is when it changes slightly. We put in a comparative point, which needs a connective and a point. So On the other hand, towards the end of the text, he is no longer as pure or noble. So we've got our comparative connective, on the other hand. You could equally say alternatively, or any other that you want to put in that supports your point. And then your secondary point, which is he is no longer as pure and noble. Notice that it links to the first one, doesn't require too much imagination, but it is necessary for the cohesion of your paragraph. Next piece of evidence from today's extract. Instead, he grimaced with disgrace. So a grimace is like a horrible frown. He's feeling very hard done by. He's feeling guilty about this disgrace that he has brought upon himself. So you put your next piece of evidence in, and then again you analyze. So upon thinking of the sin he committed by allowing Lady Bertilac to kiss him. Now, this links in with the first half of the paragraph, mainly because it shows that whereas he was noble and pure at the beginning, he has now committed a sin, which is saying that he is no longer noble and pure. You then conclude by saying, although Gawain is still seen as an honourable knight by the court of Camelot, the shame he feels at the end of the text shows that he has undergone a significant change by the end of the story. The point So your task overall, your main task for this lesson is to construct a comparative essay using the following formula. You need to write yourself an introduction, include what's the overall story about, what background, context information do you know, what have you picked up from the last two lessons. What is the biggest difference between how Gawain is presented at the beginning and the end of the extract? You don't need to support that particularly, but it might be useful to guide the rest of your essay. Now as the main chunk, you need 3 comparative paragraphs. Please see the previous slides to help you with that. And then you need to come to an overall conclusion. So how effective has the poet been in presenting the changing character or attitude or feeling of Sir Gawain? I've included some sentence starters here for you to use when constructing your main paragraphs. I've linked each one to a section of the paragraph structure I showed you in my example. So point 1, initially, Sir Gawain is presented as being something. Piece of evidence from the first extract, this is shown in the quotation, etc. This should be fairly self-explanatory. Please read through the slides. Put a little hint here. Use your mind map from the start of the lesson to help you with sections 1 to 3.